Hey friends, welcome to episode 26 of the Way Too Indiecast. Today, I've been waiting for you. We are reviewing Terminator, Genisys, the latest in the long-running sci-fi action franchise starring Emilia Clarke, Jason Clarke, Jai Courtney, and, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're also talking about our favorite gun movies, meaning movies that have firearms utilized in a cool, deadly, or even poetic way. Big guns, small guns, we take them all. Guns are in almost every movie that comes out these days in some way or another. So we'll be taking a look at those and some of our favorites. All that plus our indie picks of the week, as always, on this edition of the Way Too Indiecast, which is starting right now. I'm your host, Bernard Boo, coming to you from the Bay Area in California, and joining me today is the big boss himself, Dustin D-City Jansick, joining us from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Do you like that I say D-City?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, we're going to keep going with it. I think you and CJ are the
We all
only
have
ones
nicknames. We got to
with
give you a
nicknames.
nickname now, if we have nicknames to go by.
I don't know, because if I have a nickname, then I'm going to have to like introduce myself with the nickname, which is it's such
I
a
suppose.
dick thing to do.
We can refer to you though as your nickname.
Yeah, we'll work on that. But yeah, it's good. It's just a two-man team for now. Later on in the show, we're going to be joined by Mel Valentin to review Terminator. Dustin, you won't be able to watch Terminator, but Mel and I, through the magic of podcasting, right now we haven't seen Terminator yet, but Mel and I are getting together later after we watch the movie, and we're going to record our review of that, and that'll be later in the show. But yeah, for this section, I'm glad to have you with me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be back. It's been a while. Got a couple episodes.
I know, you've been gone.
Yeah.
What have you been doing? Running
summer.
a website or
Summer.
something?
Yeah, exactly.
Getting married,
Yeah, married.
What's that
kind of
like?
stuff.
What's married life like so far?
Oh, it's about the same. I mean, we've been together for 3 years before that, so I mean, it's not like it was, we've been in a relationship, and it's definitely some added sort of responsibilities and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel that much different, really.
Yeah, that was my experience too. My wife and I had kind of the same thing. We were together 3 years and then got married
Yeah.
2 years ago, and nothing really changed for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't really point to anything that changed between the two of us, but it's wonderful. It's one of the coolest things ever.
Yeah, it's definitely like an extra step in like, your commitment, to each other. But yeah, it's not like it drastically changes much.
Yeah. But without further ado, with all that marriage stuff out of the way, we're adults, Dustin. We're big boys.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Talking about marriage, but now we're talking about our indie picks of the week. Starting off the show as always, Dustin, I'll let you go first. What's your indie pick of the week?
Well, I'm gonna go with a very sort of unadult theme.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a little segue there. No, it's actually a coming of age film. It's about sort of becoming an adult. My indie pick this week is a film called I Believe in Unicorns. It was written and directed by a first-time filmmaker, Leah Meyerhoff. It premiered at the 2014 South by Southwest Film Festival, the one I actually attended. I didn't get a chance to see it there, but it's coming out now. It's finally coming out to video on demand. And the film's about a 16-year-old girl who's been like the sole caretaker of her wheelchair-bound mother, who's suffering from multiple sclerosis. And she's been taking care of her mother for most of her life. It's pretty much the only life that she's known. And in order to escape the sort of demanding responsibilities she has to do, she often spends her time in a fantasy land, daydreaming about imaginative worlds and with dragons and of course unicorns, because of the title. The film's depiction of these fantasy scenes are very well done, often with like stunning stop motion animations to recreate her magical world imagination that she has. The film's also shot on Super 16 and Super 8 film stock, so it gives it a really cool, nice texture. And the color grade kind of utilized in the film is kind of almost like a hipster Instagram look. So it's kind of like it's definitely aimed, for, the teenager to a young adult crowd. But very early on in the film, and I believe in unicorns, the young teenager falls for a wild skateboarder with a wild sense of adventure. He too is looking for some sort of escape. He's kind of immature, but he's older than her. So the two decide to take this road trip, but his violent side starts to come out, and she soon realizes he's not this Prince Charming, and discovers it's not the fantasy that she had imagined. It's a story of young, troubled love and the struggles of transitioning into adulthood. It's somewhat similar to some of the other female-directed indie coming-of-age films over the last couple of years, like Future Weather or It Felt Like Love. So if you've seen either of those and you liked it, you'll probably like this one too. And I Believe in Unicorns is available on demand and Vimeo on demand right now, and is actually playing limited in theaters in New York and Los Angeles. And on July 3rd, it opens in San Francisco.
Nice.
And so, yeah, I'm just finishing up my review of the film right now, so be on the lookout for my review on Way Too Indie. But yeah, I Believe in Unicorns. Check it out.
All right, so I Believe in Unicorns coming to SF soon, so maybe I'll go check that out in theaters. But my indie pick of the week is a film that takes place in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's Bat Kid Begins, a documentary by filmmaker Dana Nachman, who I interviewed on the website. You can check that article out now. On November 15th, 2013, 5-year-old Miles Scott became the center of one of the biggest, most unlikely media events in recent memory as he donned a mini cowl and became Bat Kid, cleaning up the streets of Gotham, aka San Francisco, alongside his hero, Batman. Miles was recovering from leukemia, and his parents worked with Make-A-Wish Greater Bay Area to make his dreams come true. And 25,000 people gathered in the San Francisco streets, and millions across the world watched as craftsmen, artists, actors, and organizers, and even the San Francisco police came together to make a stranger happy, although he happened to be a particularly adorable stranger. Nachman's film goes behind the scenes to show the hard work all of these people and the city of San Francisco put into making the day a reality for Miles. The movie's focused not just on what they did, but why they did it. That's a quote from Mike Jutan, who played the Penguin during Bat Kid Day. And although Bat Kid is in the title, Miles actually isn't the primary focus of the movie, nor is his illness or even the Bat Kid Day itself. The focus of the film is on the millions of people who rallied and took time off work, time off school to play pretend for a day. Being an adult sucks, and this event and this movie remind us kind of how healthy it is to play and have some unpretentious fun every once in a while. It's a really sweet documentary. It's based on a great story, and it's in theaters now.
Yeah, I remember that when that happened. That event happened a few years ago.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was cool to be here for it as well. It just made the city really happy. The thing that was really interesting about that event was it was the same setup, they told me, the organizers told me, as like when the Giants won the World Series and they had the parade.
Oh, yeah.
They had the same setup for Bat Kid Day, and the difference was that for the Giants parade, the city workers had to clean up this like huge mess, like this just catastrophe of bottles and everything. But on Bat Kid Day, everyone cleaned up their own mess. Everyone cooperated.
Nice. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was really a feel good day. It's a feel good movie, and yeah, go check it out. It's not a perfect movie, but I think it's a perfect story that the movie is covering.
Yeah, I remember when that happened and hearing about someone doing a documentary about it, and from that moment I've been really anxious to see the film. And didn't like Barack Obama even tweet about like the Bat Kid? I mean, it was like big news, right?
He sure did. He made his first Vine.
Oh, really?
Bat Kid. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. That's awesome though.
Yeah,
really cool.
I think the point of the movie, I think a lot of people think the point of the movie is Miles and his illness, but it's really not. It's about people being kind, and that spreading. But that's going to do it for our indie picks of the week. And Dustin, we've got something exciting going on.
Yeah.
We have our very first sponsor for the Way Too Indiecast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great sponsor, too. This episode is sponsored by Mubi, a curated online cinema that brings its members a hand-picked selection of the best independent, international, and classic films. Every day, Mubi's curators introduce a new title, and you have 30 days to watch it. That means there's always 30 wonderful films to enjoy, all for only $4.99 a month. That's dirt cheap. Plus, when you use their mobile apps, you can download films to watch offline. I think that's one of the coolest features. Now, I know that for me, when I boot up some streaming services, I spend more time agonizing over what to watch than actually watching movies. I think that's a pretty common experience. And
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why Mubi's so awesome, because they have impeccable taste and point you in the direction of some can't-fail, bona fide classics waiting for you to discover. All you have to do is click. Mubi's your passport to the world of cinema, and it's available all over the world in over 200 countries. So whether you're in Sioux Falls, South Dakota like Dustin, whether you're in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada like our very own dastardly dissenter CJ Prince, or even if you're the UK like our very own Eddie Haynes, you can find Mubi and be exposed to some of the best movies of all time. Way Too Indiecast listeners can try Mubi for free for a month. Just go to Mubi.com, that's MUBI.com/way2indie to redeem now. Now, there are some really great movies available right now on Mubi, movies like John Woo's Red Cliff. This kinetic, epic clash of swords and colors is the stuff CinemaScope is made for, and marks a triumphant return for the action legend John Woo. I've heard so many great things about Red Cliff, and I look forward to catching it on Mubi because they're showing the complete, uncut, international version in high definition. And just a couple other picks that you can find right now on Mubi. The movie-going world was saddened this month by the death of Christopher Lee, an icon to generations of cinephiles. He'll be missed, but even though he's no longer with us, he fortunately gifted us with one of the most prolific careers in cinema, starring in almost 300 films. So one of the greatest films he was involved with was Vampire, directed by Spanish experimental filmmaker Perry Portobello. Lee works as a subversive twist on his most enduring persona, Dracula, as a strange, ghostly, avant-garde horror film unfolds on Lee's real-life movie set. And another one I wanted to mention was Eric Rohmer's A Summer's Tale. It's finally summer, and what better way to ring in the season than with Eric Rohmer? I think Quentin Tarantino's piece of advice about Eric Rohmer was to give one of Rohmer's films a shot, and if you don't like it, don't pursue any more of his movies. But if you're going to start with one, I will vouch for A Summer's Tale. I think it's hard to beat. Literate, observant, deceptively gentle, and full of insight, Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons were French cinema's highlights of the 90s, and Summer's Tale can stand with the best. Rohmer, I love Rohmer, and I think everyone should give it a shot. It's kind of, not the most action-packed movie experience you'll ever have with all of Rohmer's movies, but it's worthy of checking out. So you can find all three of those movies, plus 27 more right now on Mubi. Again, go to Mubi.com/way2indie to get your free month.
Half the problem with Netflix is that I know that I have another chance. I can watch this at any time, so I put it off on my list. I'll watch this one. I'll add it to my list. But here you have 30 days, and you have a very limited time and a limited selection. I think that actually helps.
It does,
because you have to watch this film. You have 30 days to watch it. You don't have a year to watch it, so it kind of puts some urgency into it. And I actually think that I love that concept, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great motivator, but now I'm motivated to talk about Gun Movie. That was a terrible segue.
That was bad segue.
That was so bad. That was so bad, but a gun's to my head, Dustin. I've got to move the show and get the show on the road.
Oh boy, that was a better one.
Our favorite gun movies. Guns have been. I think Tarantino said. I'm gonna keep mentioning Tarantino throughout this, of course. If you know his movies and what topic we're on, but he said violence was made to be filmed. violence is so cinematic. There's no two ways about it. No matter how you feel about watching violence or gunfights or whatever in movies, it just looks great most of the time. So cinematic, and there's so many great examples of movies that get inventive and show gunplay or gun fighting in different ways, and there are even like iconic guns in movie lore that we'll probably bring up as we go on. But Dustin, you said you're not really a big fan of guns.
Well, yeah, I mean, guns don't necessarily do it for me. I'm not a gun collector. I'm not really big into guns. But like you said, like I think cinematically, they're certainly hard to ignore. They're really fun when done well. I think action films really lend themselves to guns, not just like what Western films, which you might maybe immediately think of. But I mean, I think at least a lot of my picks that came off the top of my head were just great action films that had some great battle scenes and gun scenes in them.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many different ways movies and filmmakers have used guns, and maybe let's get started with a couple of these. And this is, of course, inspired by Terminator, which we're reviewing later. That's one of the better gun franchises that's ever been, I think. Dustin, was that on your list? Did you have any of the Terminator movies on your list?
I thought it was, but I kind of figured it was like, yeah, kind of an implied one. So yeah. Like I think I don't know what one's better in terms of sort of guns, if Terminator 1 or Terminator 2 maybe has the best like guns in it, but either one of those definitely deserves to be mentioned on this list.
Yeah, the police station scene, the massacre in the first movie is definitely memorable. One of the most enduring images I have of that character. But also, I think in T2, the scene with the coffin. Casket, you know,
that's what I'm. Yeah, it's like kind of a toss up. They're both like they probably have them both on this list because they're both have iconic, very memorable scenes. In fact, actually, one of my picks, kind of along that same lines, I think is one of the most memorable and quoted films that revolves around guns, I suppose, is Brian De Palma's 1983 Scarface. The epic battle scene near the end of the film where Mr. Tony Montana, played of course by Al Pacino, sprays lead all over the assassins attempting to destroy him, bring him down his drug empire. And his arsenal of weapons is like a modified grenade launcher, which is really, really awesome. I mean, the whole scene I think is like it makes Scarface. I think it's one of the most memorable gun / weapon / battle scenes that there is.
Yeah, it's iconic for sure. I don't know if that wouldn't be on everybody's everybody's list. I don't know how you could ignore that. But one that's near and dear to my heart is Rio Bravo, the 1959 Howard Hawks movie. It's famously Quentin Tarantino's favorite movie. I'm not sure if it still is. Probably still is, because it's a great movie. It stars John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Ricky Nelson. It's a great Western, and I picked this because the final shootout between the good guys and bad guys, it takes place in this collection of barns and buildings with people peeking out of windows and ducking behind cover, and there's even like a fist fight that breaks out between Dean Martin's character, and one of the bad guys named Joe. He's played by Claude Akins, and it's a great shootout because it's so methodically paced, and the editing is perfect, and it's really tense. You feel like anybody could bite the dust at any point, which I think is something that gets lost a lot in modern action movies. You just never feel like anyone's actually going to die or even get shot. Here, there's a really high sense of stakes, and I love that movie. I love Rio Bravo. John Wayne, one of the best John Wayne movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. One of my favorite films also isn't necessarily like, it has a little bit of heart to it too, which you might not necessarily think of with a gun film. But one of the films I absolutely adore that features a lot of guns is Leon the Professional. An excellent
Professional.
Film. Yeah, Professional. An excellent film. I think it's an amazing film that features a fair amount of guns. It's a 1994 film starring a very young Natalie Portman. I think it might have been her first role. It probably has to be. She's like 12 in it. And it's a way better sniper film, I think, than last year's Oscar bait American Sniper. And this one, he's sort of like an assassin who's pretty like heartless and pretty emotionless. I mean, emotionalist. That's kind of comes with his territory. I mean, he hunts people down and for a living, and then he stumbles upon this very young child and sort of takes her in and protects her, and sort of you see the softer side in him a little bit, but totally awesome. I mean, there's a lot of great action scenes in the film, and like I said, a lot of good like sniping scenes. But yeah, I actually it's one of my favorite films, probably of all time.
Yeah, great film, and I'm going to keep the Tarantino train going and just wrap this up here because I've mentioned him like 70 times already. So I'm just going to wrap all these movies into one. Of course, Reservoir Dogs, the standoff at the film's finale between Harvey Keitel, Chris Penn, and Lawrence Tierney, and Tim Roth in a horizontal position. I guess he's part of the standoff. But that's another one that's tense, like the Rio Bravo scene, probably inspired by the Rio Bravo scene actually, and it's also like really Shakespearean and tragic. Yeah, so dramatic, and also Pulp Fiction. No, who's gonna ever forget Sam Jackson and John Travolta holding those guns towards the screen? It's again so iconic, and yeah, pretty much every Quentin Tarantino movie has great gunplay or guns involved in some cool scenes. Another one I want to get out there is John Woo's Hard Boiled. I think that's another classic gun movie. The climactic hospital scene is so good. Everyone knows that. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever going to top a scene like that, like try to make a scene that's similar and make a better one. Don't think that's going to happen. It's so cinematic, and the action, it's a scene that kind of like moves like the wind, the way it's edited, the way the actors move. It's just heart-stopping sometimes also when things slow down. And Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung are so badass in this movie, and is again like tying into last week's episode. It's cool to see Asian people on screen.
If there was one more that I would throw out there for sure that I would have to talk about, The Matrix. It's just more of a straight up action film than like a gun movie per se, but it still has some very great looking gun scenes. Most famously, probably the bullet time sequence.
Bullet time.
Yeah, where the camera pans around the bullet in slow motion while Neo dodges it. And there's a lot of other ones. There's a scene I know when like there's all the Smiths are like shooting guns at him, and he sort of stops all the bullets. So more like the effects, I suppose, than the guns. But there's a lot of really great action scenes involving guns in The Matrix, and the whole series really, 1 and 2 for sure. Actually, even 3. So.
Yeah, like The Matrix, like even though like you said it was maybe not a gun movie, I think as far as guns in cinema, The Matrix totally added a lot to the language of gunplay in cinema. Like bullet time was revolutionary. I don't know if it's as entertaining now as it was back then. It's so cliche now, but the way they utilized it in that movie was good because it fits into the narrative.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, like when you watch kung fu movies, which clearly The Matrix is an offshoot of, is totally inspired by. Kung fu movies often do the slow motion thing where you can like hear the raindrops and people arms are moving in slow motion. And the reason kung fu movies do that is to convey how a kung fu martial artist's mind works. When they're fighting, they're aware, all their senses are going on overload. They're aware of every sound, everything moving around them, and that's why they show things slow motion. It's not just a stylistic thing. And I think The Matrix is inspired by those movies, but is incorporating guns into the fold. So that's why, hence bullet time. It's the same thing, like Neo is in tune with his chi or whatever he fires in that movie, and he's aware of all the bullets around him. He's able to stop them and avoid them.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. It's definitely an offshoot of sort of an ode to kung fu movies for sure.
I know kung fu. Yeah,
I know kung fu.
And to slow things down a little more, we've got No Country for Old Men.
Oh yeah.
God, the shootouts in that movie. I mean, they're not even they're so sparse as far as action scenes go.
Yeah.
But the pursuit scenes with Anton Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem, and Josh Brolin's character are just so riveting. Yeah. And they take place at night. It's well that one particular scene I'm of course talking about by the hotel and outside the hotel. Where you can't even see Anton Chigurh, you just see his bullets breaking stuff around Josh Brolin. It's so cool. I mean, I sometimes I just pop that disc in just to watch that scene. I think it's masterful stuff. Yeah, another one I'd like to bring up is Evil Dead, the Evil Dead movies with Ash and his boomstick.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That one didn't cross my mind at all, but you're totally right.
The boomstick, Ash, housewares.
Yeah.
That's where you find him in Guardians of the Galaxy. I know at the end of that movie they have a pretty awesome, huge gun that I think Rocket makes, Rocket Raccoon. And they shoot, what's his face, the bad guy, generic bad guy, in the face with it. That was a pretty cool gun. Desperado.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have to mention that one.
Robert Rodriguez with the guitar case guns and rocket launchers.
Yeah.
Antonio Banderas looks like such a badass wielding, double wielding pistols.
Yeah.
In that awesome shootout. That's a great one too. I think Rodriguez is and Tarantino probably just have really awesome conversations over wine and whiskey about guns. Dustin, we probably, as always, missed a ton of great gun movies.
Lethal Weapon, Die Hard.
Die Hard. Yeah. Rambo.
Rambo.
Rambo. Saving Private Ryan, I think, is a good one.
Yeah.
Lots of great stuff. But guys, tell us what you think we missed, what your favorite gun movies are. That's gonna do it for this conversation. After a little break, we're coming back with Mel Valentin and our review of Terminator Genisys.
Listen to me, Reese, everything's changed. The 1984 John sent you to, it no longer exists.
No, this is all wrong, all right? John sent me here to save you.
From the Terminator that was sent back to kill me, I know, but we already took care of him.
We? Get down!
Reese, stop it!
Stay here!
Reese, wait! Those bullets will kill him!
If you're to kill you, stay in the truck!
Oh, great. That's just great.
I did not kill him.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Way Too Indiecast, and now we'll be reviewing Terminator Genisys, and I am very, very happy to be joined by my good buddy, Mel Valentin, film critic for... Where are you working at these days, Mel?
Primarily for Screen Invasion and Next Projection, but formerly very aware, late lamented, demented, lamented, Cinematical and SF Station, eFilm Critic, bunch of other sites. So.
Yeah, it's your second time. I'm happy to have you back here. We just covered our favorite gun movies with editor-in-chief Dustin Jansick, and now we're switching up with Mel. Good to have you, and we're reviewing Terminator Genisys, which we both saw together last night.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. It was a good. It's always a good time watching a movie with you, buddy. But
likewise.
Yeah. But Terminator Genisys is the fifth installment in the long-running Terminator series, started by James Cameron, and Alan Taylor now takes the reins and honors the mythology of the first better installments of the series, while pretty much ignoring the more recent, crappier movies altogether. Again, we find Terminator Resistance leader John Connor sending his right-hand man, Kyle Reese, played by Jai Courtney, back in time to protect and knock up his mother, Sarah Connor, played by Emilia Clarke here. And I forgot to mention, John Connor's played by Jason Clarke. Two Clarks going on in this movie.
And no relation, right?
No relation. Things go much differently than in the first movie, however, as Reese arrives in an already altered 1984, in which Miss Connor is a badass already and has been raised by a T-800, played again by Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger, reprising his role as the reprogrammable robot. This time she calls him Pops. So from this point, the film becomes both a continuation of the original mythology and also a reboot of sorts, a la J.J. Abrams' 2009 stab at Star Trek. It sees Sarah and Kyle launched forward to 2017 to destroy Skynet, which has taken the form of a life management killer app operating system before Judgment Day even happens. And that's how the movie starts. And we watched this together, and I said at the end of the movie, I said it wasn't that bad. That's the first thing I said to you.
Yeah, when you set the bar that low, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely correct. It just wasn't that bad. I mean, if you're completely against the idea of sequels or anything else related to Terminator that isn't associated with James Cameron, then obviously you're not going to like this. And like you said, the whole point that they're sort of working this reboot thing, and it's a reboot and a sequel and a sidequel or whatever it is, and then the first 20, 30 minutes are basically kind of rehashing the first film, but just expanding on it.
Right.
Of course, it's like, oh, we've got a bigger budget, so we can do all the War of the Machine stuff, that we only see briefly in the first two movies. Now we can spend, 10, 15 minutes, and the sets are bigger, the explosions are bigger, the effects are bigger. And then you're like, well, so what? So we actually get to see Kyle Reese travel through time as opposed to seeing the end result of it. We see the beginning of it. That doesn't really add much to the story until, like you said, he hits 1984, but it's an altered 1984. There's actually another, what is it, the T-1000, the metal melting
Yes.
Terminator shows
Icon.
up, basically like 7 years in advance, and he doesn't look anything like Robert Patrick. So they have different models. I was like, hey, wait a second. But it's pretty much, a mashup of the first two films for the first like 40 minutes before they jump forward to 2017.
Yeah, I think this is, pretty much what you'd expect. It's a conveyor belt thrill ride or thrill machine, if you will. That's pretty much all it is. I don't know if it adds anything else to the mythology other than a diverting storyline or timeline. But I think really at the end of the day, what this movie serves as is a fun summer movie that is totally watchable and acts kind of as a bridge from the old great first two movies and the new line of Terminator movies going forward. I don't think this is anywhere near the level of the first Terminator movies, far from it. But I think it does work well as a way to launch us forward and kind of forget the abysmal past couple films. Yeah.
I'm not completely against number 3, although it does just completely rehash things, and you get to see the John Connor as a whatever, I guess he's early 20-something who's drifting and doesn't know what he's doing, gets a girlfriend. Arnold shows up again as the Terminator, and too many of those elements we're already familiar with. New Terminator that really was pretty kind of forgettable. It's like, oh, female Terminator. She doesn't do very much. The best thing of T3 was the end of the film.
Right.
Where you think the whole point of it is, oh, now we can avert Skynet. I love how that's essentially the plot of every film from 2 on. Stop Skynet.
Yeah.
And they never really actually do, because if you stop Skynet, well, you no longer have a story to tell, right? So,
right.
I mean, there's I don't want to give too much away about T5, but it is open for sequels. Let's leave it at that. That there is a mid-credit sequence, as there typically is at these days, just to set up yet another sequel, and potentially, I guess, they've talked about another trilogy. So again, they're kind of forgetting number 3, number 4, number 4 Terminator Salvation didn't start a new trilogy. It's kind of set off in its own continuity. At this point, it's just, I think it's the best thing to do, as you were suggesting earlier, is just think of 1 and 2 as being kind of a discrete unit. They exist in one timeline. 3 and 4 basically exist in other timelines.
Mm-hmm.
So number 5 is another timeline. So you essentially have like 4 different timelines, and plus the way they just keep working it into 5th one, it really sets up, again, you were saying, and you caught on to it, the whole Star Trek thing, where those films, number 1 and 2, they don't get erased from the history of the Terminator at all. They're just set up and existing in a different timeline or different alternate universe. And then 5 can just continue on in its own. So I guess you can just go on forever, or as long as Arnold Schwarzenegger can continue to act and move around. I mean, he is 67. He's had the ongoing heart issues. He's had multiple surgeries for his heart. So, God bless him. Keep him around. But, every action star sort of reaches their end. Every actor reaches their end where they just can't do what they've done before. So, but you have stunt
But
doubles.
you know what, Mel? He's old, but he's not obsolete.
He's not obsolete.
Yeah, that's the line that's repeated in the movie. And Arnold, I think, has an interesting role here. I mean, not mildly interesting. I don't want to say it's too interesting, but he's basically an aging T-800 where he's starting to malfunction a little bit. He's not as strong as the new form of Terminator we see, which I won't spoil. But he kind of, he says that line, I'm old but not obsolete. And he has the body of a 70-year-old once Kyle and Sarah jump forward to 2017. And I think it does make him a more endearing character in the film. I did find myself being fairly entertained by his failures in trying to act human, essentially, and trying to smile and make jokes in front of Kyle Reese, who is having none of it. Pretty
Right.
much.
Well, he's basically anti-Terminator.
Right.
I mean, what's the equivalent of a racist for Terminator? He really hates them, from the get-go all the way up until the end. He's just not willing to cut Pops any slack whatsoever. So that's one of the lines of conflict in the movie that I just find kind of hilarious. It's like, oh, he hates Terminators, but he'll get over it.
Well, what did you think of the performances? There's this four central performers here, actors, is Jason Clarke, Jai Courtney, Amelia Clarke, and Arnold, of course. What did you think of these four?
For this type of film, the action film, I don't expect very much.
Right.
They hit their marks. Do they read their lines? Do they not embarrass themselves when they're reading their lines, even if the lines are kind of cornball lines or, just that's there to set up all the exposition? There's that whole bit about, setting up their romance between Courtney and Clarke, Amelia Clarke. Not Jason Clarke. That would be even really weird, considering he's their son and all that other stuff. But that I thought was, it was there because it kind of needed to be there because you're going to spend most of the 2 hours with them. So they have to have some sort of conflict or arc to their relationship.
Right.
But you know where it's going to end. So it just felt a little pointless. But as far as their performances went, I thought they were more than passable. There seems to be a lot of internet hatred for Courtney out there. And I think he's okay. I don't think he's horrible.
I don't get the hate for him. I don't understand.
He's not like my go-to actor. He's not my favorite actor, but right, yeah, there's just intense hatred for him. Maybe it was the Die Hard movie, but that movie just sucked from beginning to end.
Yeah.
That was just not a good, that wasn't even a John McClane movie anymore.
I actually liked him in the Divergent movies. I think he's really he's a great jerk.
He played a great villain. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great jerk.
Well, he's allowed to emote a little bit more too.
Right.
I think some actors just have a harder time when they're kind of playing like the straight arrow hero who's not really supposed to do anything except kind of react blandly and always be kind of cool under pressure. So maybe he's just not very good at that, or he just doesn't come across very well.
It's interesting, I found, because in a lot of movies like this, sci-fi movies where there's kind of a confusing timeline or whatever, there's time travel involved, I think his character is typically cast as almost our proxy in that he's all of the exposition goes through him to us. He's asking all the questions that we're thinking, but actually in this movie, that I don't think that's the case. Because we already know, if you're familiar with the mythology here, there's something. It's kept. I guess this is a spoiler, but it's kept from him that John Connor, who's been his mentor for most of his life, is actually his son. And that's kept from him in this movie. But actually, we know that already. So it's kind of a different kind of role here.
Right. Yes, he actually gets saved by Connor when he's just a kid, when he's like 12 or 13.
Right.
So there's this idea that he's been raised by Connor, by his own son, for 2 decades, I guess. I mean, you're assuming he's like in his early 30s, so I was like, okay, so they spent a couple decades, and John Connor's never told him, hey, by the way, you're my dad, or automatically slip into dad by mistake or something, Hey, oh, dad, oh, what? Oh, sorry.
Whoops. Yeah.
Gave it all away.
I think there's a lot of exposition in this movie for sure. I don't know. I wouldn't say I enjoyed any of it. It wasn't appealing to me, but I don't know. I think it'll probably irritate people more than it did me. I wasn't thrown by it that much. I kind of expected it in this kind of movie.
Right, like you said, with all the time travel, they go to different time periods. They start off when he's a kind of a kid, and then 2029, the one that we know about, mentions 1997, which was the original date for Judgment Day. Then it jumps to 1984, then 2017. You're right. There's so much jumping around, and actually Arnold is the one who delivers all the exposition.
Right.
A lot of the sort of time travel exposition, which kind of surprised me that he's the go-to guy for it. And there's one point they mentioned something about alternate timelines and nexus points, and I'm like, I give up. They're trying to sound credible. That's all that matters, right? Make the character sound like they know what they're talking about, and the audience will just buy in and just roll with it. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we did. There's a point you just throw your hands up and say, all right, it's an action movie more than a sci-fi movie. So.
And Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor are, of course, linked romantically by fate. It's for lack of a better word. They're supposed to bang. So there's this whole courting dynamic between them. But I think what's cool here is that Arnold is, because he's raised Sarah, his Sarah. He's protective of her, and he looks more like, he's older now. He looks like he's 70 in this film. So there's this father dynamic. So and one of my favorite little moments in the movie is this small scene where Kyle Reese and the T-800 are loading up ammo.
Yes, and
into
cartridges,
gun
right.
clips, and they start looking at each other in this competitive way, and they start racing to see who can load the ammo the fastest. And I thought that was actually pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, they really do push the idea that this Terminator, they've mentioned it from the very beginning that Terminators can change and evolve and they learn, but that's part of their programming. And the Terminator 5 Genisys really pushes the idea that it's more than that. That he's developed an attachment to her that is very human. So that, like maybe it's part of the programming that he's been able to evolve in a more human-like way, that he does have that father-daughter bond with her, and she does vice versa. I think some people might find that a little annoying, not just her calling him Pops,
Yes.
but the way she really does look up to him as a father, and not just a father figure, but as a protector, but as a father. He's not just her guardian, because the whole element is that he saves her when she's 9 years old and becomes her parental figure until we meet her as a young adult.
I mean, there's an awkward moment where Kyle, John, and Sarah are they kind of meet up and start talking about their past and their history and who they really are to each other. And that didn't really work for me. I don't know about you. I didn't find it funny or really interesting as far as the narrative was concerned.
Well, it was a bit awkward, and unfortunately, I don't want to go into spoiler territory here, even though a lot of the commercials and trailers have kind of pushed a lot of that information out there, which I think they really should have saved. I don't know why I think there's enough material in the first half of the film, and a little bit toward the second half, that they could have easily packaged, decent trailers without giving away any major spoilers.
100%.
And yet they did, and that's kind of unfortunate. That let the audience figure it out for themselves or get that surprise. I think it would have been a bigger kick to have that surprise in the film, without having the spoilers in place, and then hoping that there's like something that you're missing that they haven't spoiled yet.
Right. Right. I agree. I think this is fan service. It's big budget fan service here. Like I said, it is kind of just a bridge from the old movies, kind of appease the fans of those movies before we move on into something new. I don't know if that's confirmed, whether we're going to get another one of these, because the reviews have not been so favorable so far.
Right. I know it depends on opening weekend.
Depends on the money. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Box office. See. And at this point, it's international box office too. If it does well enough, we'll get another one. If it doesn't, I don't even know if they'll try another reboot at this point, because without Arnold, this is one series that's really so tied to the actor playing the character. When they tried with number 4 and not have him in it, except a little bit of a CGI robot in late in the film, it really suffered not having him. But again, he's 67, he's pushing 70. How many more of these does he have? And to try to reboot it again, I think this is kind of it. Although again, never say never when it comes to franchises. If they made money in the past, someone's going to come up and say, hey, we can redo this, and we'll have a new Terminator, and we'll start the story again. But do we really want to see that origin story, 1984, again? I mean, it's just like the whole Spider-Man thing. We're getting the third Spider-Man in, a decade, and he's going to be back in high school.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're going to skip over the origin of how he
Yeah.
became,
Yeah.
which is great, and they're going to have different villains, which is great. But I kind of want to get past that, but we're not.
Yeah,
You
we'll
know?
see if we restart this again. But I think the issue for me a lot of the times with these kind of movies, these big kind of that pay homages to these classic, like Jurassic Park,
Oh
I
yeah.
think is that they try to the way they pay homage is they try to restage some of the famous moments or iconic moments from the originals, but it's almost always like a lesser filmmaker doing
The
it.
lesser filmmaker
Yeah,
always feels derivative, imitative,
yeah.
and it's like, oh, we have the best state of the art special effects that can do it. So what? You know?
God, and Mel, how many times are we gonna see vehicles flipping over in slow mo? I can't stand it.
Not
I
enough.
can't
Not
stand
enough.
it.
Not enough. I'm on the opposite. We need more of them, and we need to see the Golden Gate Bridge
Yeah.
get destroyed over and over again. It has to happen at least 4 or 5 times a
What
year.
is it, man? We've been watching San Francisco get pancaked all year.
All year. It's amazing, isn't it? Over the last few years, it's just, Pacific Rim did it,
Yeah.
Godzilla did it because the climax took place in San Francisco. Yeah, I think filmmakers really love trashing San Francisco. San Andreas just last month.
Yeah, yeah, San
It's like,
Andreas.
oh,
That was impressive. That
there's
was
the bridge
impressive.
again getting destroyed. It's the most iconic. I guess it's the most iconic structure on the West Coast. So if you're going to destroy anything besides that and the Hollywood sign, both have to go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they gotta go for us to really feel it. Feel the weight of it. But okay, so Terminator Genisys, I'm gonna end it off by saying I did enjoy this movie. I felt it was I didn't feel compelled to look at my watch or my phone or whatever. And the whole time I was engaged. I felt like the action was passable, the acting was passable, and it was fun to just kind of be back in this world and be reminded of how great the first two movies were,
right. It's
and
sort of
see
the
Arnold
nostalgic kick,
reprise
yeah.
this role. I think Arnold has kind of a newfound charm as he's grown older and kind of takes himself less seriously. So although I can't really defend this as being artful in any way, or I don't know, significant in any other way that it's just fan service. I think it was a little bit of fun. How about you?
I feel similarly. I guess partly again because I don't have the same knee-jerk negative reaction to it or to the idea of another Terminator movie the way a lot of people did, or the feeling that they were kind of erasing the first two movies or revisiting them instead of moving forward. I think Star Trek fans had a bit of the same reaction to Star Trek. And my
Right.
take is always those movies still exist. They weren't taken out of circulation.
Right.
The old Star Trek TV show still exists. You can still enjoy it. All the movies they made from the old cast still there. So going off in a different direction, just kind of judge it on its own. And judging it on its own, you use the right word. It's passable. It's passable entertainment. It's not horrible. It's competently directed. I think for the most part, most of the action was easy to follow. And
Yeah.
these days, that to me is like one of the most important things. And I'm always shocked. It's like, what? He didn't shake the camera all the time, and as he was cutting, I could actually follow what was happening to the various characters in different places, and so he mixed it up enough. And he's a veteran director. Again, this isn't the guy you're going to start calling a visionary because of what he's directed, Thor 2 and now Terminator 5, but still very passable, very passable. So, and I think when I walked out, I think I told the publicist that this was the most expensive piece of fan service ever made.
Right.
And that,
Right.
so I think we were both kind of on the same wavelength there. I had to kind of explain to her what fan service was. I was like, well, the first hour is pretty much all fan service,
Yeah.
reminding you of the earlier, greater films. But like you said, there's a pitfall with that, which is reminding you of those earlier, greater films, and that you're not watching them, and you're watching basically a carbon copy of them.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's going to do it. That's our Terminator Genisys review. Thank you guys for joining us today on the Way Too Indiecast. I think we had a great time, even though we kind of jumped in time because we recorded it in two sessions, Mel's session and Dustin's previous session, but it was fun all the way through. Thank you, Dustin, for joining me on the podcast. And Mel, thank you so much. Where can
My
we
pleasure.
find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, just under my name, or Fyodor Fish. That's double F. So...
Double F. Double F.
Yes, FYODORFISH. Long story, not particularly interesting how I ended up with that username, but it's the one I've had for a decade. and it's hard to shake.
And you got quite a following on there. I know you're much better at Twitter than I am, but I'm at BJ_Boo on Twitter. You can find Way Too Indie at Way Too Indie. You can find us on Facebook and give us a like. We'd appreciate that. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Spotify. We've got a brand new music playlist up on our Spotify account. Please go check that out. Also, you can find this podcast on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Subscribe there, and you can actually also find it on YouTube. Check out our YouTube channel where you can also subscribe to this podcast, and there's a convenient little jumper, segment jumper on there where you can jump to, our Terminator review or indie picks or whatever you like. So that's a great way to consume the podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.